Of course, our country is already battling the economic impact of that lockdown and the loss of many jobs. Now, yesterday, our reporter Heidi Giokos spoke to the UK High Commissioner. She spoke about people in South Africa wanting to go overseas. But today, she joins us live now, and she's been talking about the impact on tourism coming into South Africa. Good evening to you, Heidi. So that list is so long and so many important countries on that list. What have you been finding out today?
Yes, indeed, Sally. So there are about 4 or 5 key markets that leisure tourists are not allowed to come from. And we spoke to the Tourism Business Council today, who indicated to us that about 120 billion rand has been lost in the last 6 months, probably counting more, given the fact that tourism has been completely closed off. And now, with it being opened, but only to a limited point, and these key markets not allowed into the country, there's going to be a massive impact. And now that we're also moving into summer season and peak season here in South Africa, we are unable to get those key tourists coming in from markets such as the UK, the US, France, the Netherlands. These are all countries that are on the high risk list, and tourists are not allowed in from these countries. So it's going to be a very big problem for our tourism sector, and the Tourism Business Council is predicting that over 300,000 jobs could possibly be lost if the regulations are not perhaps relooked at or changed. I put together this package. Let's have a look. The announcement of partially reopening international travel has caused more panic in the tourism sector than relief. Key overseas markets that bring in thousands of international tourists have been placed on the red list. Tourism has become increasingly critical to the economy. In 2018, it contributed 8% to total GDP. Well over 1 million jobs, or 9.2% of those employed, are connected to the tourism sector. The sector has been bleeding billions of rands due to travel restrictions on international visitors. Big spending tourists from the United States, the United Kingdom and France aren't allowed to visit.
The total inbound foreign tourism industry is our second or third busiest export. It's more or less the same as vehicle exports. It's 120 billion rand of foreign exchange a year. Of that, again, the 68%, around that amount, 70% is foreign inbound tourists from overseas as well. And so if we are not getting that, it's a significant dent in the 120 billion, which we already lost for 6 months of the year, the proportional amount. And we're now hitting the high season when it would have been a higher volume of that 120 billion spend that would have been coming into the economy.
Tens of thousands of jobs have already disappeared from the sector. Another 300,000 job losses are on the cards if the industry fails to get back to normality.
If we don't open up for this year's high season, we're also damaging our reputation for the 21-22 high season. So what's already happening is the travel trade in the outbound markets is saying we don't trust South Africa, so we are losing our market share for more than one season to the rest of the continent.
The protocols that we've put in place here at home that are being used for domestic leisure travel and business travelers are sufficient enough for all kinds of international travelers, including business travel and leisure travelers. And they should be allowed to come in, provided they produce a negative COVID test less than 72 hours before they depart.
The Tourism Business Council is demanding that government share the metrics used to determine the list of high-risk countries. Heidi Giokos in Johannesburg.
Heidi, any indication of when that list will be updated? Because things change all the time in those countries that are currently on our red list or our off-limits list.
Yes, exactly, Sally. And this is basically what the Tourism Business Council is calling for government to provide what metric government is using to determine who's on the high-risk list and who stays on that high-risk list. Government indicated when they released those regulations last week that this list is relooked at every 2 weeks. But the pressure is definitely mounting on government to possibly relook at that list. When you just look at those numbers of 120 billion rand being lost, if you consider how many jobs the tourism sector accounts for, how much it contributes to GDP, over 8%, 1.5 million jobs. One definitely needs to look at whether or not the regulations that apply for domestic tourists and business tourists coming in from these high-risk countries could possibly be applied to these leisure tourists as well from these high-risk countries.
Thank you very much for that update. That's Heidi Giokos. Staying